Hey everybody! So here we are now with 10 interesting DOM manipulation tasks. In this lecture, you will learn to manipulate the DOM and code several useful web functions. And the only prerequisite to take this lecture is to have the knowledge of the DOM and some basics of JavaScript. So if you know the DOM and the JavaScript, you can easily follow along all the concepts. However, if you don't know the DOM and the JavaScript, then this lecture is not going to help you so much. So my recommendation is before taking this lecture, learn the DOM and some JavaScript basics. I have a DOM course on my channel, so you can take that course if you want to learn the DOM or refresh your concepts, right? So these were the prerequisites you need to have. Now, let me show you the final version of all the tasks we are going to solve. Our first task is very simple, to get a value from the text box like this and print it back on the web. In the second task, we are going to program a simple to-do application. You can provide a to-do and add it to the list, right? Our third task is very practical, and here we learn to code a simple dark and light mode toggle. The task number 4 is also very practical, and you will learn to code checkboxes. We have some checkboxes. They can be checked all, unchecked all, and even we can submit the selection, right? And in our task number 5, you will learn to simulate a dice like this. An important feature of this application is once you get the dice phase 6, you won't be able to throw the dice further. So we are going to remove the click event by using the method remove event listener. And in our task number 5, you will learn how to code and create an interaction between different layers. So here you see a pink layer, and it seems like you're going to provide an email and then click on the button, and now you can see another layer appears, right? So you will learn how to code and control the layers. Our task number 7. This task is also very important, and here you will learn to disable the default behavior of the HTML. We'll talk more about the default behavior of the HTML and to disable that behavior when we start coding this application. Task number 8 is about to show random images on mouse hover, right? And in our task number 9, we're going to program another important web feature, show password. You have definitely seen this feature on the web. Our task number 10 is the final task, and here you will learn to code a JavaScript-based login system. We'll have predefined users in the system, and when the user provides right username and the password, then she will see a personalized message. So these are the 10 DOM manipulation tasks we are going to solve one by one in this lecture. Stay tuned, follow along, and move on to our first DOM manipulation task. Task 1 is simple. Get the value from the text box when the button is clicked, and then print the value back on the page. So in the HTML, we have a text box, a button, and a paragraph to show the value. In the JavaScript, we're going to start with the selection. Select the text box and the button. So the text box and the button are now selected in the JavaScript. To the button, we are going to code the click event and a handler. So when the click is performed on the button, we are going to read the value from the text box. So the property which is used to get the value of the text box is called value. So on the text box, we just need to call the value property. So now we have the text value. Let's put it back on the page. We have a paragraph to show the value. So we are going to select the paragraph using its ID, and the ID value is show value. And to the paragraph, we can directly call text content property. And to the property, we can apply the value from the text box. So here we are selecting the paragraph and calling the text content property on it. And to the text content property, we give the text from the text box. So let's refresh the page and provide some text. Click And now you can see here the text is published. So that was the task number 1. And the important thing to remember here is the value property. This property is used to get the text value from the text boxes. So let's now move on to the DOM manipulation task 2. Our task number 2 is add items to the list. It's a kind of simple to-do application. You will simply provide a task that will be added to the list. So our HTML setup, we have a text box, a button, and the to-do list. To-do list is actually a UL element, and every to-do is just a list item. Now in the JavaScript, first thing first, start with the selection. We need to select the text box, button, and the UL. And after the selection, so let's register the click event on the button and the handler. So when the click is performed, we are gonna read the value from the text box. So here we have the to-do text value from the text box, and a single to-do is actually a li inside the UL. So we need to create an li element, and the name of the element we want to create is li. So now we have everything. Here we have the text, and here is an empty li element. So we just need to put the text inside the li, and the final step is just append the li, the new li, as a child to the ul. And for that, so we have append child method. So to the ul we call the append child, and to the append child method we pass the newly created li. That's it, our task is solved. Let's make a refresh and provide a to-do, add, and here you see the new list item is added. So that was the task number 2, and we solved it. Let's now move on to the third DOM manipulation task. Our third task is interesting and practical. We are going to implement a simple light and dark mode toggle. The HTML setup, we have some text and a single button to implement the toggle. In addition, we need some CSS to activate the dark mode. So we have a class dark which turns the background color to black and the text color to white. Right, so it's a very simple toggle between the light and the dark mode. But in reality, things can be more complicated. But the concept is the same. We switch either between two selectors or between two files, one for the dark mode and one for the light mode. So in the JavaScript, the first selection is the light and dark button. So let's do that. Light and dark. And it has an ID LD, light and dark. And the button will have a click event. So let's do that. Now inside the button, everything is about toggle this dark class on the body. Body can be selected directly by its property, and to the body we're going to call the class list and then toggle. And we want to toggle the dark class. In our DOM course, we have already discussed the functionality of this method. The light mode is the default mode of the page, and when you make the first click, this dark class is added to the body, and that means this selector is gonna activate itself on the body. And when you make a second click, this dark class is removed from the body, and you will get the light mode back. So let's first check it out in the browser. So we need to refresh the page, click, and you can see the dark class is added to the body and the selector is activated. I can show you in the DOM document. Now you can see this dark class is added to the body. And when we click again, this dark class is removed from the body. So let's make a click. You can see the class is totally removed and the light mode is back. And to make it more real, we need to program some logic to change the text of the button. For example, when the light mode is activated, the text of the button should say dark, just like it says now. But when we activate the dark mode, it still says dark. So this is not good. The text here should be light. So here we need a simple logic. So we would say if document.body.classlet.contains, right? So if the body already contains the dark class, then the text of the button should be light. Otherwise, that's it. So this is the simple logic that we need. So let's refresh the page and check it out. Activate the dark mode. Now you can see the mode is dark and the text is light. Now activate the light mode. The mode is light and the text is dark. So that was the task number 3. Let's now move on to the 4th DOM manipulation task. So our task number 4 is also very practical, and you will learn to work with the checkboxes. You will learn how to check all and uncheck all on the checkboxes and submit the selection. So when you submit the selected checkboxes, they are going to read by the JavaScript. So let's learn how do we code and read checkboxes. HTML setup. We have total 5 checkboxes, right? Here you can see 5 different checkboxes. They have different values: red, blue, green, white, and black. So when we read a checkbox, we actually read its value attribute. They have the same class, so all of them can be selected in the JavaScript using the query selector all method. And then we have 3 different buttons: check all, uncheck all, and submit. So the first thing is the selection. Let's start with the selection of the checkboxes. So now we have all the checkboxes in this node list. So the first function is the check all function, and using it you can simply select all the checkboxes. So let's grab the check all button, and to the button we are gonna listen for the click. So when the check all button is clicked, we are gonna simply loop through all the checkboxes using the for each loop function. And to every checkbox, we are gonna set the checked property to true. So checked is a property for the checkboxes, and when the value to the property is true, the checkbox is selected. So here we are going to set the checked property to true for every checkbox. Let's refresh the page and click check all, and here you can see all the checkboxes are selected. And to uncheck all we need to do is just reverse this line of code. Instead of true, we set the value to false. So let's grab the uncheck button. And now I will just copy this code. We'll paste it here. And we set the value false. So this code is going to uncheck all the checked checkboxes. So refresh the page, check all, and uncheck all. And something is wrong. So let's see. Okay, so we have an error. So there is an error with the event listener. I think I made a typo. So the ID is uncheck all, uncheck. Here's the typo. Now refresh the page again, check all, uncheck all. Right? Both the functions are working. Now the last one is the submit. Submit is going to do the real thing. It will read the value of the selected checkboxes. So let's start with the selection and get this submit button. So our submit button is ready. Now, a checkbox is always a multi-select tool. That means a user can select multiple options. And to save those options, we can take an array. So in an array, we can simply store all the values of the selected checkboxes. So when the submit button is clicked, we are going to again walk through all the checkboxes and we'll investigate them one by one. And if the checkbox checked is true, so store the value of that checkbox in the array. That's it. So if the checked property of the checkbox is true, we are going to read its value attribute. And these are the value attributes. And we are pushing them in the array. And finally, we can simply print our array in the console to see the selection. And I think we need to do one more thing here. We actually need to clear our array before every selection. Otherwise, it will just grow with every click. So empty the array and fill it with the new selections. So let's refresh the page, check all and submit. Now we see all the values in the JavaScript. Now uncheck all and select some of them. Let's say green and black. Submit. Now you can see only the green and black values. And you can select any other, let's say red, and submit. Now you can see red, green, and black. So that was the task number 4 on our list, and we solved it. So let's now move on to the 5th DOM manipulation task. In our 5th task, you will learn to simulate a dice, a single dice. So using this button, a user can throw a dice and can get a dice value between 1 to 6. And I'll be using dice images for displaying the values. And this application also has an important feature. When the user gets the value 6, then she won't be able to throw any dice further. And we are going to implement this feature by removing the event listener from the button. So that is something new. We didn't discuss it in our DOM course, but you will learn it here. So let's learn dice simulation using the JavaScript. So here is our HTML setup. We just need an image element for showing the dice and a button to throw the dice. The important thing here is the images. To code this application, you need all the dice faces. I have all the dice images and a cover image. You can download these faces I am using in this application from the link I put in the description, or you can download your own faces from the internet. Another important thing here is the name of the faces. As you can see, all the dices have the dice string common, and then they have the dice numbers from 1 to 6. So these dice numbers we are going to randomly generate in the JavaScript, and then we'll pick a face corresponding to that random number. Right, so the dice images must have this corresponding number. Dice 1 is simply the dice face 1, as you can see here. Dice 2 is the dice face 2, right? So that was the setup we need to have to simulate one or more dices. In the JavaScript, we can start as usual with the selection. We need the image element and the button. And to the button, we need to activate the click event. So when the button is clicked, a dice is rolled, and that means we need to generate a random dice value, a value between 1 to 6, right? Dice values. And to generate random values, we usually use a random function, and that function belongs to the math object. And we need to understand this random function because it doesn't give integer values, it gives floating point numbers. So at this point, I'm calling the function in the log. So let's see what do we get there. So let's refresh the page and open the console. And now click on the button. So let me click several times. So what do we see here? The random values generated by the function. The random function in the JavaScript gives floating point values greater than or equal to 0 and less than 1. Or in other words, it gives a value from 0 to 0.99, where 0 is also included. So this is how random function works in the JavaScript, and by using some mathematics we can simply get the integer values. So let me show you how to transform these floating point values to the integer values. So the first step should be to multiply the floating point value from the random number with 6, because 6 is the highest dice value. So whatever the random value is, it is multiplied by the 6. And now in the output, you will get the values like this. So now you see the values before the decimal and after the decimal. The lowest bound is 0 and the highest bound is 5. So we are multiplying value with the 6. So the highest value we can get is 5. And it can never be 6 because the random number generated is always less than 1. And what do we need are the values from 1 to 6. So here we have the 0 point something, which is the minimum value, and 5 point something, which is the maximum value. And if I round up the minimum value, it will become 1, and the maximum value will become 6. And when we round up, we get rid of the decimal part. So in the JavaScript, in order to round a value, we have several functions. We have random function, float function, and the ceil function. So the function that we need here is the ceil function. Ceil gonna round up the value. For example, if the value is 0.4, and when we round up the value, it becomes 1. So we are gonna pass this entire equation to the ceil function, just like this. So whatever is returned by random multiplied by 6 is passed to the ceil function. And now we will get random dice values from 1 to 6. Refresh the page and click until we get the lowest and the highest value. Here's the lowest, 1. And here you see the highest value, 6, right? So here you see the random dice values. And these values are actually used to pick a dice face. Now we don't need to log this random dice. We need to save it in a variable. So variable D is going to hold a random dice number. And using that number, we can simply pick a corresponding dice image. How? Let me show you. So to the image element, we can directly select the src attribute. Src attribute holds the image. And now we are going to write a string like this. Now we'll see how the dice image name is formed using the random dice number. Now let's say if the random dice value is true, then this whole string would become dice2.png. So dice2.png is this image, right? This image I'm gonna apply it to the image element. So we have almost solved the problem. This string gonna be different all the time based on the random dice value. And as a result, you will see different dice images whenever you click on the button. So let's check this application in the browser before we code further. So refresh the page and click on the button, and you see different dice images, right? So the first part is done. We can simulate a dice. In the second part, we're going to remove the click event when the dice value is 6. So right under where we show the dice image, we code an if statement. We will say if t equals 6, then simply call remove event listener method on the button. So this method gonna remove the click event we registered earlier on the button. And this method takes two mandatory parameters. The first one is the name of the event, and the second one is the name of the handler. So with the second parameter, we have a slight problem because we have a handler which is anonymous, and we can't refer it to the remove listener method. So what we can do here is we can assign this function to a variable like this. So now our arrow function is assigned to the variable f, and that variable can be used as reference to the function in the remove event listener method, just like this. Now it will work. The event and the handler is removed from the button when the dice value is 6. So let's refresh the application and click until the dice value is 6. Now you can see the listener is removed. We can't throw the dice, right? So, my dear listeners, that was our task number 5 and we solved it. In this task, you learned random function, die simulation, and the remove event listener method. So let's now move on to our sixth DOM manipulation task. So our sixth task is about layers, working with multiple layers. To code multiple layers on a single page is a very practical thing, and you have seen such applications on the web where you interact with the one layer, it disappears, and another appears. So our HTML setup, we have two different layers or two boxes, layer 1 and layer 2. And to make them look like a box or a layer, we need to apply some basic CSS like width, height, and background color. Flex is for centering the elements inside a layer. So layer 1 with the subscribe option is our default layer. And the layer 2 is hidden. The display is set to none. And if I deactivate the display, we will see both the layers. So let me refresh. Now you can see both the layers. So this green box layer is the hidden layer and it will come up when user subscribes. So it's a simple scenario and can easily be done just by managing the display property. So we need to activate display none on the layer 2. And so now in the JavaScript, we'll start with the selection of this subscribe button. And now we will register the click on the button. So when the subscribe button is clicked, we are going to read the value from the text box. In the ID and the text box is email, and we can call the value property on it. So now we have the email value in our program, and it's now time to hide the layer 1. So let's grab the layer 1, access the CSS, call the display, and set the display to none. So layer 1 is now hidden, and it's now time to show layer 2. And there should be a period sign here as well. It's a class selector. Display flex, because flex is applied on both the boxes. And the last statement is going to put the subscribe email in layer 2. So we have a paragraph for that. So simply get the paragraph, text content on the paragraph, and assign the email. That's it. Hide one layer and show the other one. So refresh the page and provide an email. Click subscribe, and here you see the layer number 2. So that was a simple task. Have two layers and play with the display property. So the task number 6 is solved. Let's now move on to our 7th DOM manipulation task. Our task number 7 is important, and it will give you more understanding and more knowledge about the DOM. And you will learn to control the default behavior of the HTML via JavaScript and the DOM. So in task number 7, we will code a simple login application. So the HTML setup, we have a form element with 3 input tags inside. The first input is for the username, the second one is for the password, and the third input is a special one. The type of the third input is submit, and this type creates a button in the browser. So this button is the submit button. But the submit type has another function. When we click on it, it collects all the data from the input element and send it to the server-side page. The server-side page is usually coded in the action attribute. So as we have nothing to do with the server-side programming, I have just put a normal HTML page here. So what will happen at this point? When I click on the submit button, this private page.html is called. And I have this page in my editor, as you can see here, and it only contains a message to the user. Hello, user. Right? So this submit button is a special one. It submits the form to the server. Now in the browser, you can see as I click on the submit button, the other page is called, right? So this is the default behavior of the form and the submit button. Now the problem here is that submit just submits a form. It has nothing to do with the data or the data validation. As you see, the username and the password are not provided, but still we can see the private page. And what I want is when the username and the password provided correctly, then this private page should be open. But HTML can't do that. It's JavaScript who can interrupt the form submission and do data validation. And how is that possible? Let me show you in the code editor. In the JavaScript, we're going to first select this input button. And now we will register the click on the button. So the submit button is selected and the click event is registered on it. And you have seen the default behavior of the submit button. It simply submits the form. So the first thing that we need to do is just disable the default behavior of the button. So when the default behavior is disabled, then we can perform data validation. And after the validation, we can again activate the behavior. So to disable the default behavior of any HTML element, DOM provides a special method, which is called prevent default. So the method prevent default simply disables the default behavior of the HTML. For example, if you apply prevent default on the checkbox, then you won't longer be able to select the checkbox because the prevent default gonna disable the selection on the checkbox. So to apply the prevent default on the button, on the submit button, we need its event object. So pass the event object to the function, and to the event object, we simply call the prevent default method. We have already discussed the event object in our DOM course. It simply gives the element who is raising the event. So now the default behavior of this submit button is disabled. And that means when you click on it, nothing will happen. This page won't be called. So let me refresh the page. Now click and you will see. So the default behavior of this submit button is disabled now. So now we can perform the data validation. Let's say in a system, we have a user name Peter and the password is ABC123. So if the provided username and the password is exactly the same, Peter and ABC123, then we are going to activate the form submission. So let's read the values from the text boxes. And in an if statement, we can simply validate the username and the password. So if the username and the password provided are the same that we have in the system, then we are gonna submit the form. And to submit the form, we need the form element because this submit is actually fires on the form element. So select the form. It has no class, so we can select it using the tag name method. So the submit method is called on the form via the JavaScript. And this method is going to activate the submission or simply submit the form to this file. So here see how JavaScript comes in between and disables the default, and when everything is good, it enables the submission. So let's refresh the page. The username is Peter and the password is ABC123. Now click and nothing happened. So I think something is wrong with the application. Check the console for errors. There is no error. So the conditional username, yes, here should be the username value, right? Username against the username and password against the password. So it should work now. Teacher ABC123. Click, and now you see the private page. So you see how JavaScript controls the submission of the form. And you can also make this application more interactive by displaying the login errors. So in case of failed login attempt, we would come in the else statement, and here we can say just create a new paragraph. To the paragraph, we're going to put a message like username or password is not correct, and we can put the warning color to the paragraph. Let's say red, and now we can append this paragraph as a child to the form element. So to the form we can call append child like this. So with the failed login attempt, you will see this error message in red color. So refresh the page and click, and here see the error message. So my dear listener, that was our task number 7, and we solved it, and we learned how to deactivate or disable the default behavior of the HTML. So let's now move on to our 8th DOM manipulation task. So in our task number 8, we will show a random emoji on mouse hover. It's a simple task and can be coded in few lines. So let's have a look at the HTML. All we need is just an element to show the emoji. I am using the div here, and you can use any element. And using the font size property, I've increased the size of the emoji to 10 rem, right? Now in the JavaScript, we have an array with emojis, and we have a lot of emojis. So we will use this array to get a random emoji. We can also use APIs to get random emojis. There are some APIs, but in that case, our code becomes very advanced. We need to work with the fetch API, promises, etc. This lecture is for beginners, and that's why I'm trying to keep things simple. So now we need the div in the JavaScript so that we can code event on it. So let's grab it. Now the event on the div is not click, it's actually mouse over. Mouse over works exactly as mouse hover, right? So now when the mouse is over the div, we're gonna pick a random emoji from the array. And how do we do that? These emojis have their own indexes, right? Because they are in the array. For example, the first emoji is at index 0, the second one is at index 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. And to pick a random emoji, we just need to generate a random index value between 0 to 1 minus total length. And this can easily be done using the random function and some mathematics. Random function we have already discussed earlier, right? And to get a valid index from the array, we are gonna code something like, so there should be the calculation, and this line of code gonna give you a valid integer index which goes from 0 to total length minus 1. Let's open the console and see what do we get there. So refresh the page and let me do some mouse over. Now open the console, and here see random values, right? These are the indices. Now based on these indices, we just need to pick the corresponding emojis. So we can save this indice number, let's say in a variable I, And now to our div, we are gonna call the text content and pick an emoji from the array based on the index value, just like this. So our project is solved. If the random value, for example, is 5, so the emoji at index 5 is assigned to the div. And that would be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This one. So refresh the page and do the mouse over. Here you see. Right? Random emojis. So my dear listeners, that was our task number 8 and we solved it. Let's now move on to our ninth DOM manipulation task. So our task number 9 is show password. It's a very practical function and you have definitely seen it on so many websites. So just by clicking on the checkbox, you can see your password in clear text. So it's a JavaScript application, and how do we code it? Let's find it out. The HTML setup is very simple. We have a password text box and a checkbox to show and hide the password. So in the JavaScript, we need to select both the input elements. So let's do that one by one. So now we have selected both the input elements. The checkbox needs a click event, and when the click is performed on it, we are going to further find out if the value is checked or not, right? So let's code the click on the checkbox. So whenever user clicks on the checkbox, we are going to investigate if the value is checked, a property is checked or not. Right? So on every click, we find out if the checkbox is checked or not. And if the checkbox is checked, we are just gonna show the password in clear text. Otherwise, we will hide the password. And to code these two options, all we need to do is just manipulate this type option. So when the type is set to the password, you simply get a password text box. And in the password text box, text is simply replaced with asterisk. For example, if I write something here, you will only see the asterisk. But if I change the type attribute from password to text, I will get a normal text box. Now you can see the text you type in the text box. So let me show you here. Let's type something, and now you can see the clear text. So we just need to play with the type attribute in order to code this show password function. So to show password, on the input element, we are gonna call the set attribute method, and the attribute we wanna set is a type attribute, and the value to the attribute is text. That's it. So when the checkbox is checked, that means show password in the clear text, and for that we just need to change the type attribute to text. And when the checkbox is not checked, we are gonna do the opposite. We're gonna change back the type attribute to password. So let's now check the result in the browser. Now unclick and you won't see the password. So that was our task number 9, and it was a useful web function, and we solved it. Let's now move on to our last DOM manipulation task, task number 10. In our final task, we'll pick up JavaScript-based in-logging system. It's not a real in-logging. Real in-logging is performed on the server side, and JavaScript is a client-side language. But you will still learn about the process, even though the system is not real. So how this system is going to work? We have some predefined users in the system. They have a username and the password. So if the user provides the right username and the password that we have in the system, then we will display a welcome message. So our HTML setup, we have a username and a password text box and a login button. And when the user is logged in successfully, we are going to hide this login option and we show this welcome message. So this welcome message is actually another layer which is hidden. As you can see, the display is none to the layer. So we're going to show this layer only when the user logs in. Now in the JavaScript, like I said earlier, we have some predefined users in the system. So we have 3 users in an array named users, and every user is actually an object with 3 properties: username, password, and full name. So the users array has 3 components, 3 objects. And as you know, components in an array has their own indices. The first object or the first user is at index 0, the second one is at index 1, and the third one is at index number 2. So that means if I want to get access to the first user, I will call it like users of index 0. So users of 0 means I am pointing towards the first component. And in the console, you can see the entire object of the user, right? So you can see the user 1, right? So using the index value, we can point to the entire object. And to read the value of the properties, we need to code another step. After the index, we need to name the property we wanna read out. For example, the username, right? So the username property of the first user, and the property has a value user1. That means in the output, you will see the username. So let me refresh the page. Now you can see the property username's value. So this is how we can simply read the values, and we need these values in order to validate the login. So now you have got the background, how to read the properties of the users. Let's now move on. The login operation is performed when this login button is clicked. That means we need to grab this button in the JavaScript. So let's grab it. And now register the event. So when the click is performed, we are going to validate the login. And to do so, we need the values from the text boxes. So let's get them one by one. Right, so here we are reading the username and the password provided by the user in the text boxes. And the next step should be to compare this username and the password provided by the user against the users we have in our system. So we can simply loop through our array users and then can access the properties for comparison. And the properties we want to compare is the username and the password. Username against the provided username and the password against the provided password. So let's code a loop and walk through the array. So this loop is going to walk through all the components from index 0 to 2. And so inside the loop, we're going to code a condition to check for the usernames and the password. So there should be a condition to validate a username against the username and the password against the password. Provided username against the system username and provided password against the system password. And if this statement becomes true, that means any one of them has provided the right username in the password. So what we're going to do further when the user is logged in, I think we're going to need a control variable. So somewhere in the JavaScript file outside of the function, we would take a variable is login set to false. So is login is actually a control variable. It will keep track if someone is logged in the system or not. And I think in addition to this control variable, we actually need another variable to keep track who is logged in, which user is logged in. because we have 3 users in the system. So we need to keep track the logged in user, right? So these two variables are important to keep track the system is login and who is login. To who is login, I put a default -1. It will help me to investigate the variable. Now, coming back to the validation. So when this if statement becomes true, that means someone has provided the right username in the password. So in this case, we're going to set the is login to true. And right after that, we're going to save the information about the logged in user in the variable who is login. And one more statement that we're going to figure out here is the break statement. So the break is going to stop the loop and save the time. For example, if the user 1 tries to log in, then we save the user and then break. That means we don't need to go further and investigate the others, right? Now we have all the information in these two control variables to program other operations. For example, when the in-logging is successful, we are going to show this welcome box. So outside of the loop, I will investigate the is login variable, right? So if is login is true, I'm gonna display this welcome box. So I will get the welcome box. And in the welcome box, we have a paragraph to display the message. So let's grab the paragraph. Into the paragraph, we will call the text content property. And here we can write a message, welcome, and the name of the user. And to get the name of the logged in user, we need to use this variable. And the property is name, right? So you can see the use of both the control variables is login and who is login. And the last statement is to hide the login option, right? Hide this entire container. So let's get the container. So our login application is programmed. Let's now check the result in the browser, and I hope it will work without any problem. So refresh the page, provide a username, user1, and press 1, click login, and now you can see the user1 is Peter. So you see the name of the Peter. So let's check the other user. Let's say user3, pass 3, click login. As you can see, our third user is now logged in, the name Murray, right? So the welcome message, as you can see, is personalized. A user can see its name. So my dear listeners, that was the final task of this lecture, and we solved it. And I hope you enjoyed the lecture and learned something from it. Do tell me how it was and how was your experience just by leaving comments under the video. I'll see you around in some other lectures. Thanks for watching.